The story of wise Cherab. Once upon a time, in a certain world, there was a man named Cherab. He is a boy and has resourcefulness. Everything he gets his hands on turns out well, and he knows how to get out of every difficult situation. So many people come to him to help them out when they get stuck. Tao. One day, the king passed through the boy and number 39's hometown, and he saw many people crowded in front of a small house. "Go see what they are doing there," he ordered a chamberlain. A while later this man returned and said, "People say that he is the wisest man in the country. He lived in that house and his name was Cherab." And the others were waiting to see him to be told about something. "What? The wisest person?" the king whispered, extremely annoyed. "But the wisest person is me." As soon as he returned to the palace, the king called his prime minister and said, "In your opinion, who is the best in the country?" "Obviously the emperor." The prime minister bowed his head respectfully. "Everyone knows that the ruler is always the wisest. You know that, but not everyone knows." The king pouted. In the village there was a certain Cherab, a young man who everyone said was wonderful. "I want to compete with him, to let the people know once and for all that I am right in every situation. Call that name to me now." So Cherab went to the palace. He greeted the king very politely. The king said, "Do you hear this? I have heard about you. I and number 39's love to know what you can do. I give you the honor of competing with me." Cherab was surprised and could only bow his head and be silent. The king continued, "Look at this precious gem," and the king pointed to the jade gem he wore on his chest. "You will not find a pearl like it in any country. If you get it from me, I will give it to you. But I will take care that you Don and number 39's do that. People will clearly see who is more skillful among the two of us." Cherab thought for a moment and then replied, "Please obey, but I Don and number 39's know when I will try my hand. It could be tomorrow, but it could also be later. It could be during the day, it could be at night. Try it any time you want." The king ended with a contemptuous laugh. Cherab chuckled, bowed deeply and withdrew. The king immediately ordered, "Soldiers beat drums." He called out, "Soldiers playing drums?" The prime minister was surprised. "Of course they are drummers." A minister said immediately, "Your Majesty has said it clearly. Let and number 39's see, where are the drummers?" The king condescended to smile and explained to the ministers, "You should not doubt the reason why I want soldiers to play the drums, because the king and number 39's wisdom lies there. The drummer will stand in front of my room with his instrument, drumsticks in hand. If you ever see Cherab appear, immediately beat the drum and we will all know. That and number 39's a good idea, Don and number 39's TUC? A truly imperial opinion." The king and number 39's advisors muttered respectfully. The king also explained further. In the kitchen, a guard will watch over the fire. Another person took care of providing abundant pine firewood. If anything moved, they would immediately light up the fire, and the fire would burn so brightly that even a fly could be seen. You understand that, in such conditions, thieves cannot hide anywhere, right? Obviously the strategists have opinions. 4 cavalrymen will be stationed at the palace gate, each with a saddled horse tied to a stake. If Cherab still got the pearl even though we were so carefully Prepared, he still wouldn't and #39 T have escaped when the cavalry wanted him. The king concluded with a triumphant voice. Surely he cannot escape. The strategists smiled and spoke flatteringly. The king and number 39's orders were executed immediately. After that, the whole palace was excited to see where and when Cherab would appear. But nothing happened. That night, when the king went to bed, he looked anxiously at the jade stone, took it off the jewelry and put it in his mouth. So he felt relieved and lay down to sleep. But all night nothing happened. The next day was still a quiet day. Day passed, night passed, still no Cherab was seen. The servants began to be negligent, and after 2 sleepless nights, everyone was so sleepy that they wanted to die. The 3rd day passed like the previous 2, then night came. In front of the palace gate, the 4 cold cavalrymen shrank back, occasionally dozing off, or looking bored at the sky. Staying awake like this all the time is so miserable. An old woman passed by, speaking in a pitiful tone. She carried a bag of wine on her back. "We are happy to serve the king," the first soldier said sarcastically while blowing into his hands to relieve the cold. "Yes, that and number 39's right," the second person added while yawning loudly. Agree, but it and number 39's cold like this." The old woman complained. "If only you guys could drink some wine." "Just say that. If only we had wine." The soldiers grumbled. "But what and number 39's in your bag? It and number 39's not wine, is it?" "Of course it and number 39's wine, young men. If it wasn't and #39 T then I wouldn't and #39 T have made you want to confess," the old woman said with a smile. "For me, selling to anyone is the same." She put down the leather bag, and the soldiers began to drink. They drank well and warmed up, but after a while they all fell asleep. The old woman took the reins of 4 horses and tied them to a farther place. Then she went to find 4 buffaloes in the barn and brought them to where the 4 horses were. Then she walked through the door and headed straight for the kitchen. A maid dozed off next to the fire and another servant slept near a pile of dry firewood. The old woman tiptoed to the maid and stuffed a bunch of straw into her bun. Then she stopped next to the servant and carefully poured a handful of grit into his sleeve. She tried to suppress her laughter as she tiptoed upstairs and almost stepped on the drummer. "And quat, let and number 39's see, God really loves cunning," she whispered. "But you can and number 39's catch me just by doing that." The drummer soldier is sleeping soundly next to the drum. The problem is to deceive him. And quat. Then the strange old woman gently tore the drumstick from the soldier and number 39's hand and replaced it with a knife. Then she entered the king and number 39's bedroom. The king is snoring in bed. The shadow dressed in women and number 39's clothes attentively observed the sleeping king. Then she took off her female guise, and Cherab appeared. "Your Majesty, you see clearly, it and number 39's me," he said. "But where did you hide the pearl?" Cherab felt a moment of concern when he didn't and #39 see the pearl on the king and number 39's chest. And quat. So where is he hiding? And quat. Cherab looked everywhere, but in vain. There is nothing, nowhere is there anything. He looked closely at the king again. Sop, serp. Dot. Puff. Dot. Puff. Dot. The king snored carelessly. However, Cherab noticed that one cheek seemed larger than the other. Puff. Pow. Dot. Funny sounds came out of the king and number 39's mouth. And quat, here it is, I found it. And quat, Cherab told himself. But how to get the pearl out? And quat. However, he did not have time to think much. At that moment the king made a much more strange noise, and in a series of sneezes, he spit out the pearl. Dot. He breathed a long sigh of relief, turned over on his other side, and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep again. Cherab took a pair of scissors from his pocket, gently cut a strand of his beard. Then he put it on the man and number 39's head. Sleeping with a hat made of dried buffalo bladders, quickly picked up the pearl and ran out of the room. Passing by the drummer, he pounded the drum and shouted loudly, and quat, here is Cherab. Cherab is here, and quat, and ran to hang the sausage around his neck. In the kitchen, the woman sitting by the fire suddenly woke up. And quat, Cherab. Cherab. And quat, emergency. And quat, she shouted as she put straw into the furnace to rekindle the fire. But when she bent down, the straw on her head turned on the fire and the poor maid cried out in heart-wrenching screams as she ran to the lake to put it out. Extinguish the fire. The person in charge of the pile of dry wood jumped up when he heard the screams and tried to throw the wood into the fire while still sleepy. But the grit in his sleeve fell into the furnace, causing the coal to scatter everywhere. And the fire went out. The noise startled the king awake. And quat, Cherab. And quat, he mumbled while still sleepy. He opened it but saw nothing. He ran his hand over his face and felt the bubble wrap. Buffalo. He was horrified, wondering, and quat, what is growing on my head, and quat. In extreme emotion, he heard screams and people running. Suddenly a flash of lightning flashed in his mind, and quat, Cherab. And quat. He cried loudly, but the hood muffled the sound. The door to his room suddenly opened and the counselors rushed in. They saw the king jumping up with a strange hat on his head, and they heard a sound. The stuffy voice repeated over and over again, and quat, Cherab. Cherab. And quat. The counselors exchanged a knowing look. What a number 39's going on? The second counselor whispered to the first counselor, glancing sideways at the strange hat. Another new and brilliant idea from the king! Exclamation mark. The first strategist declared confidently. Meanwhile, the king had taken off his hat. Thief! Quickly catch him! Cherab has arrived! He shouted so loudly that the city walls shook. Everyone agreed. They rushed out. But where was Cherab? He was gone. Before the commotion woke the 4 soldiers, he was out the door, jumped on one horse and reined the others. He rode quickly in dark night, leave that place. When awakened by that noise, the 4 soldiers were still staggering, wondering what they were doing there, but when they gradually regained their senses, they suddenly understood. Get on your horse quickly. But the animal they jumped on was not a horse. In vain they cursed the animals, stimulated them, kicked them with their shoes. Nothing was done. Finally, the first animal took a step forward. And quat, it moved forward. And quat, up and quat. The cavalryman shouted triumphantly. The other 3 buffaloes followed the same motion and, with a bang, the 4 strange and quat horses and quat walked back to the stable with such determination that it was clear that they were not what can convince them to leave their cages and go to the main road. And quat, "Nothing can be done," and quat, the soldiers said to each other and returned to the palace. The next day, Cherab met the king. He wanted to show people his beard and the pearl in his hand. He presented the pearl to the king and said, "Then I have succeeded, right or wrong?" I took the liberty of presenting to the king a clump of his beard as proof that I personally came to his bed. And I bring you the pearl, please reward me as promised. The king gritted his teeth, angry like crazy. He took the pearl and threw it hard on the ground. Dirty pearl. I Don and number 39. T want to see it anymore. I will step on it. As for you, you stupid bastard, go away. Your insolence has offended me very much. Cherab did not dare to ask for anything more. He hurriedly left the palace and went home. Meanwhile, the king ordered the pearl to be crushed because he was upset that he had lost it. But when the pearl was destroyed, he was even angrier at having lost it. As time passed, the king only thought about his shame and the loss of such a precious thing. He tormented himself to the point of having a nervous breakdown and finally died of anger and depression. Since he often repeated that the ruler is always right, people concluded that the person who is always right must be the ruler. And people honored Cherab as king. That was the first time someone was king because he was a human being and not because he was considered the wisest because he was a king. Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.